We are now going to build a two-page process that uses URL variables. And I have these pages set up for you. So if you want to follow along with me, it's URL click and URL display. So let's take a look at the click page first. This is dealing with pets, and the idea behind this is the user opens up this page and they click a link for their favorite pet, and there are 6 different ones here. Once the user clicks on a link, such as the dog link, the next page is going to say a dog is your favorite pet, and everywhere there are these X's, we're going to drop in whatever this word is onto the next page. This one has an extra S purposely. You'll see why once we set this up. So how do we create this? Well, this whole piece is all set up. So let's get working with this one so we can get the data over to this second page through a query string, and then we'll set up the second page to display that information. And we're going to use some Dreamweaver features to do this. Now, the way I created this interface here was I closed up all of the panels by going to Window, Show Panels, and then I went out to Window, and let's see, where is that located? It's such habit for me, right here in front of my face. I did the tile vertically. Now, if you are on the Mac side, you probably just have a single tile option, not a horizontal versus vertical. So, subtle difference between the Mac and PC. If you're on the Windows side and you put your interface in this particular manner, you'll have a tough time getting it back to tabs. The way you get it back to tabs is by clicking this middle link, Maximize. I'll click that, it pops right back into tab view for both pages. So I'm just trying to kind of gradually move you into getting a feel for working with the Dreamweaver panels. Now let's take a look at our hyperlinks and how this page is set up in Code View. And if I go into Code View, you'll see we're using the includes on this page to pull in the header and footer. I also have some information inside of an HTML comment here, and we're going to use that so you don't have to sit and watch me do quite so much typing. This is a completed version of this page in terms of setting up the query string. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll get these copied over to set this all up so we can move to page 2 and display it. So here is our query string. Notice the left-hand side is our hyperlink. Our hyperlinks are all set up right here already for you along with the words. So what we need to do is add the query string piece. So I'm going to add a question mark. Then following the question mark, I'm going to put pet equals, and whatever the pet is going to go after the equal sign. So for the cat link, I'm going to say pet equals cat. For the bird link, it's going to say pet equals bird. This all goes right after the question mark. Now I also have a second query string on here that we're going to use as well. So these characters represent an ampersand in HTML, and it actually creates ASCII characters. So that ampersand, AMP, semicolon, is the ASCII character equivalent of the ampersand. If I put this into design view and I uncommented it, you'd be able to see that. Just trust me on that one. Feel free to uncomment these. These are HTML comments. You can uncomment them by simply selecting all of that and clicking Remove Comment. Now, after this ampersand, we have description equals man's best friend. Now, notice there's a plus sign between these words. Within a URL, you should not have spaces. If you're on certain types of web servers, it won't honor that necessarily. So we use a space to represent that information. So let's add one of these so you can get a better idea of how to use it. So I'm going to take the query string portion, which is everything, including the question mark. I'm going to copy that and paste it right after the P in PHP. So I'll do a paste right here. using Control V or Command V. I'll start doing that. It's a little bit quicker for me than right-clicking to do paste all the time. And here is my question mark. Pet equals dog. Description equals man's best friend. So let's test it out just for this first one. It's usually a good idea to test things once you've done one instead of copying that mistake 6 times. So I don't need to click the link to test this. What I'm going to do is simply hover over it. And you'll see down below, right down in this corner of the page here, when I hover over it, you can see, yes, it's passing that information. So let's go ahead and finish that up for the other 5 pages. So I'll copy this. This is a cat. The description is furry. So I'll paste this one in. So I'm simply doing a copy and paste from the question mark right up to that double quote. Aren't you glad you're not having to watch me type all this? So feel free to uncomment this out if you don't want to go through pasting. I want you to see this particular process so you can recognize the regular basic link and also the query string portion, because sometimes these get a bit lengthy and it gets a bit confusing to take a look at them. You kind of have to chop them up into pieces. Okay, chameleon. This particular one is added here because my son had a chameleon for a while, but I'm sorry, he has passed into another world. So he is no longer with us, so I put this up in his honor. Anyway, let's put this in the browser and see what we have. So, pet equals dog, pet equals cat, bird is chirpy, hamster is cute, bunny is soft, and chameleon is fascinating. I wasn't quite sure what to put for a chameleon. I've never really been fascinated with them, but my son was. So our page is all set up. We have our query string. When I click the link, it's going to take me to URL display. So let's move out to that page and see what we need to do here. And for this page, we can stay in design view. We're going to use a Dreamweaver interface feature that'll make this process really simple. So I know I'm passing 2 pieces of information to this page. The first one is called pet, and the second one is called description. So I'm going to use those 2 words on page 2. We are now going to take a look at setting up a URL variable in Dreamweaver here, and we need a new panel to do that. And the panel I need to open is the Bindings panel. So I'm going to double-click CSS Styles, and I'm going to double-click Bindings, and that will open it up. Now make sure you have 3 check marks right here. That means that your testing server is understood by Dreamweaver. And I've had some issues in terms of just recognizing that even though it's set up. So should you have any issues, this may be a Windows 7 thing, I'm not sure. But if you click on testing server, you should see check marks in these 2 areas and also this way. Just click save again. And quite often, this little check mark will show up. So it's just a funny little quirk in case you have any trouble. So all 3 are checked. We know there's a testing server, and Dreamweaver recognizes it. So I'll hit the plus sign in the Bindings panel. And the Bindings panel is a way for Dreamweaver to create variables for you. And the variable type we want to create is a URL variable. Now, when you use this Bindings panel, you are only creating that particular variable on the page that's showing. So we need to make sure we're on the URL display page. This is the page that's going to get those URL variables, and we'll display them here. So select URL variable. And the first one we have is named pet. We put pet equals after the question mark in our query string. So we're going to set up pet. I'm also going to create another one by hitting the plus sign, URL variable, and this one is going to be description. So Dreamweaver is creating the code for us for this URL variable. Now this is where it gets interesting and very simple. I'm going to select these two X's. I put these in to represent a location where we need to place a variable. So it makes it easier for me to recognize it. I can build the page, and then as soon as I open it, I know where I need to add information. So what I'm going to do is select those two X's. I'm going to come over to Pet, and I'm going to click Insert. If those are selected before I click Insert, Dreamweaver will replace those X's. As you can see, notice it says url.pet. Now that is just representing a URL variable. When this page is previewed and we start at the initial page, URL click, that information will be passed to here and it will be displayed. So let's just continue doing this. These two X's here, I'll represent those and do the same thing. That's my pet. You like, this represents pet as well. So select pet and insert. Now you can see why I added the S. And these last two X's are going to be our description. So select description, click insert. Now if we look in code view, Dreamweaver has added a fair amount of information within this section. Now I certainly could have just typed this in, but since we're using Dreamweaver, let's let Dreamweaver do the work for us. Notice these are individual PHP code blocks that PHP will represent and process. And here is our echo, which means write to the page. And the way you represent a URL variable is not with just a plain $ in the word, like our regular local variables we used earlier, but it's an underscore get. So a URL variable is a get type variable in PHP, and we do need the underscore in there. Inside of here goes whatever the variable name is. So here it says pet, pet, pet. Actually, it's way over here. And here we have description. So let's preview this two-page process now that we have it set up. I'll go over to URL click. You must click one of these links to create that variable. So I'll preview. I'll click on dog, and it says a dog is your favorite pet. A dog. Oops, we need an extra space in here. We'll have to fix that. You'll find those little things happen as you're working in these variables. So you just go back and add a space. You like dogs. That's why I added the S, because they are. Here's our second variable, man's best friend. If I go back and click cat, it says cat, and they're furry. Bird says bird, etc. So let's go back and fix our spacing issue. Now it's after the word like on our display page. And you can see this code is right up against the E. So all I need to do is put a space in there, save the page. We'll re-preview. And let me talk about re-previewing that page in just a second. But let's make sure that our space has been fixed. And there it is. Okay, now about previewing this page. If I go to Preview URL Display, you'll see nothing shows. I don't get an error because errors are turned off in PHP, at least by default. So we don't get a PHP error, we just get a goofy looking page. So ultimately, what we want to do is test this page and make sure that these variables are passed before we try and use them. And we can do a redirect to do that, and we'll take a look at a redirect later. So ultimately, I would want to add a little more coding to this page, testing to see if this variable called pet has been defined or not. If it has, we'll display the page. If it hasn't, we'll send them back to URL click using a redirect. But we'll do that coming up here. So let's take a look at URL click one last time. I'll put it in the browser, click on Bunny, and I'll just test all of these. I have one more to test. And there we are. So that is working with a URL variable, creating it using a query string, and displaying it using the bindings panel in Dreamweaver, and creating URL variables here to let Dreamweaver do our work for us. Don't you love Dreamweaver that way? I'm going to be showing you a lot more features similar to this, where Dreamweaver really makes it simple, or at least speeds up the process of dynamic web development.